Yo, good day, gents, and welcome to another episode of the Father's Fire podcast. As you know, every week we get together to explore the joys, the challenges, the triumphs, the sorrows, and yes, the fun of being a dad. And I'm sitting down with the guy that knows how to have fun as a dad, but also knows how to get his kid to work. So please say hello, welcome to my good friend Steve Thompson. He runs a nice little detail shop out of Boise, Idaho called the Detail Doctors. And you may have seen his son, the Detail Kid, little Steve. You guys have been traveling all over the country the last couple years.
Yes.
The thing that's interesting to me is, and if you guys haven't checked him out, so go out to Instagram, check out the Detail Kid, check out the Detail Doctors. But from a very young age, you have a young son, Steven. He's now 13. Happy birthday, Steven. Just had his birthday a couple weeks ago. And he's just been passionate about cars. And you're a car guy. I mean, you've built a very successful business. So I'd like to talk about what that is like, having a young kid so passionate about something and you helping him fulfill that dream.
Okay. Stephen loves cars. All of our family has grown up in the shop working, and he loves coming into the shop, working in the shop, being around everything. Where the other kids maybe not so much. He got certified at 11, and yes, things took off, and we've been traveling, and there have been a lot of opportunities for him since then. So we still have two other kids at home, and they have their own interests and things like that. And so it's been a juggle having the other kids, because it's difficult to just load up and say, okay, we're going to Florida, okay, we're going to New York, and they're just sitting there on the couch as we're packing the bags, and we can't afford for the whole family to travel, barely for just Stephen and I. And so it's reinforcing their interests and passions and trying to spend as much quality time with them while I'm home, so that they're not feeling neglected or just overlooked. And so it's thrown a lot of struggles as a father. We're learning, all the time. And so I don't know.
So I'd like to talk about that, right? Because on one hand, you have a kid that is very passionate about cars, right? And because of his passion, it has opened up these opportunities for him to not only travel across the country, but work on some amazing projects. I mean, Peterson Automobile Museum down in Houston just a week ago, learning how to detail airplanes. I mean, just all these incredible opportunities. And I can see how that, like the kids who are being left at home could feel like, well, where's my time to shine? When do I get to do all of these cool things with dad? And you've been able to do that. Last year you and Tay went the East Coast, if I remember correctly, and visited some schools because she's really interested in medicine. Mm-hmm. She's like your brainiac kid.
Yeah.
So how have you talked about that and worked through that so that each one of your kids feel like dad's their biggest fan as well, just not the kid that's visible to everybody else?
Yeah, it's there's no easy answer to that. It's showing an extra amount of attention to those kids, and when we're home, and it's a family deal. Like we have to have talks with Stephen, like, hey, we're at home and we're it's not about you, and we have to put an extra emphasis over here on Reagan's basketball game or Taylor's basketball game or Taylor just got she's going to state for that presentation I emailed you
That's
a few
awesome.
weeks ago. So
Yeah.
she's going to state for that. So we have to put an extra big spotlight on anything else that anybody else is doing. And Steven understands that, like, okay, this is not my time to shine. Like, he gets enough attention. He's been on Rockefeller Center in New York, NBC Live. It's crazy. And so our other kids don't develop a complex. We've spent a lot of time trying to figure out and learn as we're going how to finesse that. The answer is I don't know. I don't know what
it's interesting because as you're talking about this, I was reflecting on our experience adopting 2 kids, right? And so we adopted our son and daughter, Cynthia and Ashton, at 8 and 9. And so when they came in, there was a lot of emotional baggage that they brought with them because of the challenges that they went through as little kids, right? And so there was all of a sudden some immediate attention that had to be given to blend a family, to address those needs. And I had to be very conscientious that I didn't neglect or intentionally or unintentionally make my biological kids feel like they were less loved, less important. So one of the things that Judy and I did was we actually set up where every month we went out on a date with one of the kids. So she would take one, I'd take one, and they got to pick whatever they wanted to do. We put a budget on it. And it was amazing because a lot of those times were very simple things. Sometimes it was just going to sushi or going to get ice cream. Sometimes they wanted to, go roller skating or bowling or something like that. But what I found was the really impactful thing about those experiences is that we had time just one-on-one, and they could just talk to me about anything. And sometimes it was something very heavy that was on their heart, but other times it was just regular day-to-day kid school stuff, friend stuff. And I really, when looking back, I really enjoyed that time with each one of my kids because it gave me a moment to really focus all of my attention on them. No distractions, no work, no kids competing against each other. And I think that really helped bind our family together because each kid had their moment with me and mom, right? And I think that's really important.
Definitely. Every day I take Reagan to school. That's our time. Steven and Taylor, they ride together. Taylor drives. And so I used to be the dad that would be in the parent pickup line, just like, let's go, let's move the line. And I got to get to work. And there came a day when I realized that, I can never get back that time with Taylor or Steven. I can't hold their hand and walk them up to the front door.
Right.
Not happening.
Not happening.
Not happening. And but Reagan's 10. And so ever since last year, I made it a point that we park at the far end of the parking lot. We get out of the truck. I hold her hand. I walk her up to the door. And on the way to school, on the way home from school, and same thing, I pick her up. So, I set my schedule around the family. And I'm pretty darn good at that. And so every day I pick her up from school, same thing. I'll go over, get her, and we walk to the truck. And I ask her how her day is. In the mornings, I wish her well for her day. But it's those moments we can never get back. And so I definitely have regret not doing that with the older kids, but I'm taking advantage of it. And I always look at the other parents, not judging, but in the parent pickup line, I think that used to be me. That used to be, and we all have different lives, but I do enjoy that time. This book that you pointed out, a little bit ago. That book sits on the dash of my truck, and every day there's different. There's short little paragraphs, but it's about happiness and how patience leads to happiness, how courage leads to happiness. And so Reagan and I will read one every day on the way to school, and then we talk about it. So we read on the way to school, on the way home from school, and that's our time for bonding, like the dates. And we don't do it as often as you did, the once a month. I think that's so important. But this time it's so important because Taylor is a junior, but already we just had a Zoom meeting with a guy from that helps with college admissions and that whole deal. And even though she is only a junior, I feel like I'm being robbed of an entire year because she's so focused. And he said that she's late to the game. He said usually kids are already dealing with him at 8th grade, 9th grade. So she's late at this point. And so that time with our kids is just, it's so fast.
Yeah. The idea of it being late, I think our society has moved so much emphasis on what are you going to do when you get out of school? What's your career goal? What have you set up? What's your 5-year plan? And it puts this false pressure on our kids and our family to go, oh man, if I don't do this, this, and this by the time they're in 8th grade or 10th grade, 11th grade, oh, I failed as a parent. And what I've come to realize, especially now that my kids are moving out, moved out pretty much, is that, like you said, you don't get those times back. And your kids are going to remember those moments when you were doing something together. Most importantly, they're going to remember how you made them feel. More than what you said or did, they're going to remember that dad loved me, he was present, he made time for me. And, it's interesting. On Sunday, I was sitting at the table and I was a little chilled because I know winter doesn't want to go away. So I went and grabbed a sweatshirt, and I grabbed my favorite sweatshirt. And my favorite sweatshirt is a maroon sweatshirt that has a ski lift on it, and it has Pound Sedrick on the back. And that was my son Zane's sweatshirt for when he was on the ski team. And so when he was on the ski team, the first year or two that he was on it, I didn't realize that I could go up and watch the events, right? Because they would buckle everybody up in the bus and they'd be off. And I'm like, man, this sucks, right? So that one year, I'm like, dude, I want to be a volunteer parent so that I can ride up on the bus with them. I can, help with the ski patrol. I can watch the race. I can ski with them after the race is done. And dude, it was such a great time. And I love that sweatshirt because it brings back so many memories of me and Zane. And I think it's important that we as dads make time for those moments because, dude, you blink and they're 8, you blink they're 16, and then next thing you know, they're out the door, right? And it does go so fast. And I think one of the areas that a lot of families struggle with is that once their kids move out, they don't know what to do with themselves or with their kids. And Judy and I have been very purposeful about staying engaged with our kids. And in fact, I was just talking to Devin. I was like, dude, we need to take a little 3-day trip down to Costa Rica and go surfing, so because he's down there right now. And I'm like, yeah, we need to do that, and he's 31, right? It's like you can't lose that.
It's tough. Yeah, you made the jump from 8 to 16, and that's not an exaggeration. It goes so fast. And you try to do the right things. With Steven, that is like the ultimate parent challenge. It really is. And when people hear about Steven's story, a lot of people will put their mothering hat on and well, what are you doing, and how are you? And I love that. I just talked to a lady yesterday, because typically we'll get the question of, well, how are you balancing his life? And we had to make that decision early on. Like, I just showed you a picture. There's a guy with a 70s Chevelle that wants him, not me, wants him to detail their 70s Chevelle. And he asked, what's the time frame? So we have to look at Steven's schedule. We only allow him to do one, maybe two a month, depending on his schedule. If he's going to Florida or if he's going to Houston, then that counts as basically doing a detail. So, but yesterday I had a lady, and she asked me, what are you doing to prepare him for if the limelight goes out? And I was at a networking convention, and so that struck me, because that has never occurred to me. What do you do when the limelight goes out and he's not in the spotlight anymore? How will that affect him? And I thought that could have a very negative effect on him. I said, yeah, what if he has to just go get a normal job and just be like everybody else, and he's not got this little mini celebrity status, And so I had to really ponder, and still am. And I talked to my wife about it when I got home, and I said, you'll never believe what this lady said to me today. And that had never occurred to us. And so it's like constant parenting, just these.
It's always a curveball, man.
At you. Yeah.
It's always a curveball. That's an interesting point to ponder, right? And I think about my son, Devin, who is just a phenomenal musician and artist. He's extremely creative. And I always told my kids, whether it was Devin or Kaylani or Aston or Zane or, Christian and Cincha, all of them, I'm always like, look, what do you want to do? Because I'll support you, whatever you want to do. And the follow-up question was, why not you? Because I think a lot of times we go into fear mode, and it's like, what happens when the limelight goes away? Well, why does it have to go away?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But it's a good question, right? It's just like when Kaylani went to UVU, she started playing club volleyball at like the age of 6, right? And she always was playing up in age group, and she was always the starter. And they actually, UVU asked her to graduate early so she could come and join the team and do spring training. So she rushed through, got all of her graduation details ironed out, and went to UVU. And I told her, I said, remember, you're now stepping up a level. You're used to always dominating the court, always being the player that people rely upon. You're going into a different environment where now, wherever you are, you need to have an impact. So can you have an impact on the bench? Can you have an impact on the court? Can you have an impact in your relationships with your teammates? Because no matter where you are, you can have an impact if you have the right mindset. And dude, she owned that. I mean, she went all in. And it's interesting because until that year, UVU had never gone to the NCAA tournaments. Never. In 35 years of the coach being there, they'd never made it to the tournament. And Kaylani made such a big impact, and she was kind of this clutch player where they would pull her in on key times to serve. And so they went to the NCAA tournaments. Me and my brother got to go. And so we go, and they really should have made it to round 2. But they, like any team, sometimes you get in your mind and you stumble and you end up getting knocked out. Well, what was interesting was when I came home, Judy goes, you got to watch this. I go, what do you mean? She goes, I recorded the game on ESPN. And there was a pivotal point in the game where the outside blocker blocked a pass or a hit, and it went on the other side and they scored a point. And man, the whole it really was kind of a shifter in that game.
Mm.
And everybody just went up and roar. And what was interesting though was, as impactful as that play was on the court, the camera, the ESPN camera, shifted to the bench, and the announcer goes, and there's Kaylani Sedrick, the juice of the team.
Hmm.
And she was on the bench, right? And so it just really re-emphasized to me that no matter where you're at, and sometimes we're in a position that maybe we deem as supportive or secondary, but at that time in our life, that is exactly where we need to be. It's just, can we embrace the journey of going through that until our time to shine goes? And so I think there's seasons to shine and seasons to move in the shadows and learn and become and develop. That way you're prepared for the next moment to shine.
I agree. I agree. It's that doesn't surprise me that she has that type of energy and just being your daughter. It's just you have that impact. It's you can't go anywhere and you just don't bring energy. People today, I'm doing the most mundane work, and you walk in the door, and it's like, hey, there's Jody. Like you just bring such a high level of energy and just
Well, we try, dude. But here's the thing, right? It's like, that's an interesting observation, because I think a lot of times we internally go, dude, I'm not bringing it today. Or like, it's just like this morning when Judy and I, we work out every day, and dude, we went in and I was not feeling it. I mean, I had my pre-workout, I had everything ready to go, but I was not feeling it. But I was like, you know what? I'm here. I'm going to push through this mental thing, because it really was a mental thing. Yeah, I was a little tired, but what I found is that a lot of times when you're tired, a lot of times it's just emotionally drained. And it's like, can you dig in and go, all right, I'm going to be disciplined in this moment, right? And I think that's one of the big things to teach our kids, for those moments when they're shining and when they fall back and they're in a season of preparation for the future, that discipline overcomes dark moments. It overcomes the lack of motivation. It overcomes a quote tripping in the direction that we're going. And sometimes that tripping is really a pivot, right? And so can we teach our kids to pivot? Because like right now, Kaylani, she's been out of college for a year, and all of a sudden she doesn't have the schedule of working out, of lifting weights, of practice, of school, and all that. And now she's going, all right, all of the structure went away. What do I have to do to go to the next phase of my life, right? And so I think preparing them and teaching them how to work through those moments is really important.
yeah, what we teach them from a young age is critical. I am biased to a certain I mean, you always look at your kids and you have those biases. But I'm also around other kids sometimes and I'm just like, this kid is tearing this place apart and the parents are just okay with that, and they're just destroying other people's stuff. I'm like, what is happening here? And so what I try to do is just provide as much structure. And what Steven's done is beyond what anybody could ever think, but for me, but it's making me take steps that my other kids are as prepared as they could possibly be. Kehlani, I'm sure, with all that structure going out into the workforce and into the world, she is going to be a highly motivated individual that doing what she's done, she can set her mind on any task and just be incredibly successful.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that I see is that, and it became pretty obvious, right? Is she's so driven for success that she has a hard time tolerating people that don't have that same kind of drive. So teaching grace and allowing people to not be as driven as you are and that it's okay. And that's a delicate balance, right? Because on one hand, you want to inspire your kids to move forward, but you also want to empower them to be loving and graceful to other people that maybe are not on the same level. And that's a challenging thing.
Well, everybody's brought up in different environments. And
Yeah.
so what we've been really working on with our youngest is making the right choices of what she's learned and not her adapting to the people around her that maybe not be making. It's like you have to be the example. We've taught you a certain way. You need to hold to that in the way that she acts because she's a kid. So as far as the I'm using a specific example of a kid like destroying like our house in particular, like that example comes that my daughter started partaking in just destroying our house along with this friend that she had over, and I thought it made me question: is she going to other people's houses and doing the same thing?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I can't answer that because I'm not there. So it's me having conversations like, hey, you know, when you go to someone else's house, yeah, you know, teaching moments, right? Teaching moments. And I got to say, I keep coming back to this dang book, but it is so impactful that I know that things like this work because we use it in examples of Stephen may do something and she'll reflect back to the book. She'll say, well, Stephen didn't do this or Taylor didn't do that. She's not acting this way. And we'll talk about it. And it's just like constant teaching moments that kids are capable of so much at such a young age. And they're going to make mistakes. My kids are far, far, far from perfect.
Spur of growing.
But I'd rather be reading a book that's teaching my daughter reading at an adult level. Number one, there's words in there that we got to work our way through. It's stoplights and stop signs. What's this word? But she's got to speak loud enough that I can hear her over the truck. So she's verbally talking, and she enjoys it most of all. We're not listening to the radio. We're not whatever. It's our time together, and we're talking, and she'll bring up things that maybe she wouldn't that happen at school,
Yeah.
or other times. And I don't know. I enjoy it so much. It's good. It's good for both of us. I'm learning a lot. I mean, obviously in the book, and you just keep.
So
your parents are watching. Your kids are watching you grow up. You know, same as you're watching them grow up.
you know that's an interesting point. So let's talk about that kind of in wrap up because I know you got a busy day and you're running the business, and you know you talk about your kids watching you grow up because really you think about it. I mean, like I had my first kid at 24. Right. I didn't have all the pieces together. I mean, I did not, right? So looking back, what has been most striking about the changes that you've made personally as a dad and a husband?
It used to be work first. You know, when you're younger, I think there's such an emphasis, like you touched on earlier. Oh, you got to go to college. You got to do this. You got to do that. And there's a lot of pressure for a young man or a young woman that if you're the one going out into the workforce and you're the one providing primarily it's job first, family second. And I missed so much of my 24-year-old son Colby, of him growing up, so much of Taylor in those early days. And Of course, I would change it. Looking back, that would be it. Work first, the most important thing, and family second. And yeah, yeah. If I could do it over, So
Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of times we look back and we look back with regret instead of look back with learning. My son said something really powerful that's just resonated with my heart. He said it a couple years ago, and I don't even remember the context of what we were talking about, but he made his statement. He said, Dad, I have no regrets. I go, what do you mean by that? He goes, yeah. He goes, I have no regrets because I realize that the decisions that I made as a younger man have led me to this point. And they're all foundational elements that have built me into who I am today. And so my opportunity is to use what I am today to move forward in the future. And I appreciate that because, there are some things, when I look back at my life that I could arguably say, I regret that I did that or I didn't do this, right? Instead of going, you know what, all of those decisions, all those experiences led me to the point where I am today, and it's made me who I am today. So the question really is, do I like who I am today? And if I don't like who I am today, what can I do to become that person? Because sometimes becoming the dad that you want to be or the husband that you want to be starts by shedding some things, but also building some things. And so, one of the things that we have to learn how to do, especially as dads, a lot of times we're carrying the weight of supporting our family emotionally, financially, physically, all that stuff, is learning how to build while being strong. But also, sometimes being strong requires us to be vulnerable, it requires us to be authentic. And I think a lot of times we put it all on our shoulders instead of like you, who you've been blessed with an amazing wife, allowing her to be such a key part in growing together, which inevitably helps you grow as a man.
my wife Melissa she is such the foundation in our family. Um, I learned from her so much. She is, you know
I
her.
do know her.
You know her. My kids get all of their smarts from her. So
I don't know, dude. You're pretty smart. You have street smarts. You are very tactical. You're very imaginative. You're very creative. And that creativity opens doors. And I think a lot of times we think that just because we're not smart or we didn't get a degree, that we're not everything we should have been, when really, dude, some of your natural gifts are what open the doors for you. And that's one of the things I just watch you. It's like the other day, or a couple weeks ago, I came in and you're literally dialing for dollars to try to fill the leather repair company training that's coming up in April, right? And you're literally putting the effort, and you have such courage to go, hey, you know what? This is Steve Thompson from Detail Doctors. I'm in Boise. We have an amazing event. A lot of people, dude, the very thought of picking up the phone and talking to people makes them cringe, right? And so I think we all need to not discount the not only the skills but the natural gifts that God has given us to have an impact on our family, on our circle of influence, because I think there's kind of this tendency for us to focus on what we aren't instead of what we are.
you know, yeah, that's true. But when we focus on what we aren't, and we understand what we aren't, we can also learn.
Yes.
And you're one of those people that I've been learning from ever since I met you. Uh, like you and I'm not just saying that because we're on this. I'm on your podcast. I've said it to
No,
I've said
you
it to your
told me
face,
before, yes.
and I've said it to a lot of people more than you'd ever know behind your back, in a good way. That you are one of the people in life that inspires others, and hopefully, this podcast is reaching tens of thousands of people that can learn. I just have the pleasure of knowing you and getting to see you on a
Yeah.
regular basis. But the conversations that we have, you and your wife, you both bring different aspects to your relationship. Just hearing that and seeing the love in your family, it's like, wow, I need more of that. Like, and so if we don't recognize what we're lacking, then we don't seek it out from others.
Yes.
And
I agree with that.
You see it on a meme and like, oh wow, that's inspirational. You see it and then you forget it 5 minutes later. But when you're around those people, I mean, you truly do have an influence that's ongoing. And I've told you about problems that I have in my life, that I've had in my life, and being able to have people like that. Richard Hutchins just posted something today, about people being able to get together and talk about problems. I mean, there needs to be definitely more things like that. But
It makes a big difference. And that's really, why I started the podcast. Years ago I heard these two guys talking. It was on another podcast, and they were talking about their horrible experience with their dad, or lack of experience in the one guy's experience. And I just was like, man, that wasn't my experience. And so I wanted to create an environment where I could share my journey being a dad, the example that I saw in my dad. I mean, I was real, and I recognize this. I was really blessed to have a dad that was very present and involved in my dad, in our family's life. Right, that is, and I recognize that. It's funny because years ago, and I know we're about out of time, but years ago when my dad was still alive, um, he and my mom came over, and my younger siblings came over for Memorial Day, and it was kind of a cool weekend. And I invited my friend Rob to come join us, and Rob and my dad just hit it off. I mean, they just connected. Rob was a Marine, my dad was a Navy guy, and they just had lots to talk about. And I came in on the Monday morning, and Rob goes, "Man, thanks, Jody, for inviting me to spend time with your family. We had such a great time, and dude, I really enjoyed your dad. He's a really cool guy." And he goes, "But man, your family's messed up." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Your family's not normal." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Your family likes each other." He goes, "That's not normal." He goes, I don't talk to my brother or my sister." And it made me really realize what a blessing I had in my parents, who, were married for 50 years before my dad died. And it was just a great experience. And so I'm trying to make sure that I extend that legacy, right? Because who you see I am today is a large part because of who my dad and my mom were, right? And it's interesting because I have a really good friend that was from a very abusive family, and he at 14 decided that he was going to break the chain. He said, "I will never be abusive. I will not let my dad be abusive to my mom anymore." And he broke the chain. And I think, whether you had a rough life, or you had a good life, or you kind of had a blend of the two, because let's be honest, families are messy. Even with my dad, things got messy, right? I can share some stories that were like, oh, but it's like, what do we do with those? What do we do with those pieces? Being authentic with yourself and looking in the mirror and going, yeah, I wasn't at my best. I'm not at my best. And this is what I need to do to become who I want to be. So Well, anyway, I know you got to get back to work. You got someone right at the door waiting for you. Guys, thank you so much for tapping in. I always love these conversations, especially when we're one-on-one. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And as you've probably heard, my second book is out. It's available on Amazon. If you would like a signed copy of it, send me a DM and I'll tell you what we got to do to make that happen. But I'm supposed to get them from Amazon about March 17th. So they'll be going out. So super excited. That honestly was probably as much for me as it was for hopefully you guys. So anyway, it's but how far must I go? A journey in faith. I take a very real, raw, hard look at what it means to have faith, both in yourself and others and in God, and just try to be very authentic with it. So thank you so much. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
You know I love you. I love your family. And you guys, we will check you same time, same bad channel. See ya.